Superb. There are those who prefer the 76, but to my mind the 71 has never been surpassed. It has that extra touch of finesse. Now, let me see. Ah, yes. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm afraid that things have been allowed to go just a little far, have they not? They are an expensive addiction. Fascinating, of course, exciting, but expensive. Payment in full 10 days from now, or the possibility of your continuing good health will attract only very short odds.
Silver Blaze by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Dramatized for radio by Bert Coules. With Clive Merrison as Sherlock Holmes and Michael Williams as Dr. John Watson. And featuring Jack May as Colonel Ross. Silver Blaze.
There you are, Edith.
Thank you, Jim.
Excuse me. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Didn't mean to startle you.
Who are you, sir?
Fact is, I'm lost. Can you tell me where I am?
You're at King's Pyland Training Stables.
Am I indeed? What a stroke of luck.
Excuse me, sir.
No, wait. I understand that a lad watches over the horses at night.
How did you know that?
Is that his supper? Smells good. Let's stay where you are. Now, I'm sure you'd like to earn the price of a new dress, wouldn't you? See that the boy has this tonight, and you shall have the prettiest dress that money can buy.
What is it?
Just make sure that he has it.
Get out of my way!
Quiet, Kane. What's the matter with you? It's only Edie with the supper.
Ned! Open the window, quick!
What's the matter?
Oh, Ned!
What's wrong? Here, give me that.
There's a man! He's coming over here!
What? Did he touch you?
He kept on about you!
Me?
I want to talk to you about Silver Blaze. It'll put some money in your pocket.
Edie, run back to the house and get Mr. Straker, quick.
Right!
You shouldn't have done that.
You damn tout. I'll show you how we treat your sort. What are you doing? Get away from that window! You get out now, or I set a dog on you!
All right, I'm going. No need for violence. You should have helped me, you know.
Easy, Blaze. That's the way. You did quite right to call me, Ned. Down totes.
No, I didn't like the look of him, Governor. And he proper put the wind up Edie.
Did he threaten you at all?
Well, not in so many words, but you should have seen his stick, huh? I bet he could be handy with that if he wanted.
He'll likely not be back. But keep your eyes open.
Mr. Straker.
And make sure you lock this door after me.
What's that?
Go back to sleep, love.
Oh, John. What time is it?
Just after 1. Go back to sleep.
Why are you dressed? What's the matter?
Nothing. Look, I can't settle. I'm going over to the stables.
Oh, John. He won't have come back.
I'm just going to check that everything's all right. Don't worry.
Good morning, ma'am.
Oh, Edith, have you seen my husband?
No, ma'am.
Well, leave that, Edith. Come with me.
Ned? Ned!
What's the matter with him? Ned! John! John!
Ned!
Can you hear me? Is he sick, Mum? Let me look at him. Edie, I think he's been drugged. Drugged? Run up to the loft and wake Jim and Freddie. Yes, Mum. Oh, my God. Edie! What? Silver Blaze! He's gone!
I told you I could see something. It's Master's coat. What the devil's it doing out here? Fred, look! Down in the hollow. Oh, God. Careful. Oh, God almighty. Pull yourself together. Help me get him covered up before the missus sees him.
Freddie? Jim? Are you down there?
Go back, Mom! Edie, don't let her see!
What do you mean? Move aside.
Oh.
Do as I say.
Yes, Mom.
Do you mind if I open the window?
No, no.
Sherlock Holmes had been up since long before breakfast, rambling about our room with his chin upon his chest and his brows knitted, charging and recharging his pipe with the strongest and most foul-smelling black tobacco, and absolutely deaf to any of my questions or remarks. I said, would you mind if I opened a window?
Now, where the devil did I put that telegram?
I knew perfectly well what it was that he was brooding over. There was only one problem before the public which could offer any challenge to his powers of analysis.
Oh, Watson, where is that damn thing?
Perhaps if the air were a little clearer, you'd be able to see where you put it.
Watson, I've made a blunder.
Oh, yes?
Yes, I'm afraid it's a more common occurrence than anyone would think who only knew me through your ridiculously romanticized writings.
Now, wait just 1 minute.
What?
If we're going to have this argument yet again, I insist on... I've never known a man who so despised fresh air. And before we start in on my shortcomings, may I say that nothing I've ever done could possibly irritate you half as much as that laugh irritates me.
Really?
Really.
Huh. That's fascinating. Why haven't you mentioned this before? Well, perhaps your forthcoming nuptials have given you a new spirit of frankness. Do you intend to be this direct with the excellent Miss Morstan?
We will not discuss Miss Morstan, if you don't mind.
It would make an absolutely splendid monograph. Yes, upon the classification of non-verbal utterances and their effects on various listeners.
Good God, and you have the infernal gall to criticize my writing?
Yes, well, perhaps you're right.
Well, what's so amusing about fresh air, anyway?
No, it was just that your mentioning it was so beautifully apposite. I have to go down to Devon.
Ah, to the King's Pyland Racing Stables on Dartmoor.
Bravo, Watson.
Ah, I've been expecting it. I'm only surprised that you weren't sent for 2 days ago.
I was.
Ah.
As I said, a blunder. We're going well. Our rate at present is 53.5 miles per hour.
53.5 miles. Ah, I haven't observed the quarter-mile posts.
Nor have I.
Oh.
But the telegraph poles on this line are 60 yards apart, and the calculation is a simple one.
So, what was this blunder?
Well, the fact is, I didn't believe that the most famous and distinctive racehorse in England could remain concealed for very long, especially in so sparse a place as the north of Dartmoor. Now, I thought the case would be over and done with days ago.
According to this, it is. What about the man they've arrested for the murder?
Fitzroy Simpson.
The paper speaks well of this Inspector Gregory. He seems to have an excellent case.
No, he has nothing.
Come on. Simpson was hanging round the stables, trying to bribe the maid, threatening the lad.
He hasn't found the horse. The horse is the key.
Simpson was making off with the horse when Straker caught up with him, and he killed the trainer in order to get away. So, if Gregory can get Simpson to confess to the murder, then the whole story of what he's done with the horse will come out. Isn't that the obvious approach?
Exactly, the obvious approach. Gregory may be making a name for himself, but he lacks the most essential quality for a detective.
And that is?
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, an honor.
Inspector?
May I present Colonel Ross, the employer of the murdered man, and the owner of Silver Blaze.
Good afternoon, Colonel.
Mr. Holmes, Gregory here speaks very highly of you.
Oh.
I trust you'll live up to his recommendations.
Let us hope that your trust is justified.
You may rest assured, Colonel, that if anyone can bring this murderer to book, Holmes can.
Well, of course, I'm anxious that poor Straker should be avenged. But make no mistake, Mr. Holmes, I'm engaging you to recover my horse.
Colonel, you have made your position perfectly clear.
Good.
I'm quite convinced that Simpson is our man. Of course, he's still denying all knowledge of the business.
Tell me, Colonel, how long has Straker been in your employ?
12 years.
A good man?
The best trainer I've ever had. There was no aspect of the business he couldn't handle. From the smallest local merchant to the grandest London breeder.
Did he often deal with such people on your behalf?
One does not keep a dog and bark oneself.
No, I suppose not.
Tell me about the horse.
Silver Blaze. He's named for the pure white streak on his forehead. Apart from that and a mottled off hind leg, he's as black as jet. He's certainly the most valuable horse in the country.
And he's the prime favourite for the Wessex Plate next Tuesday.
Well, he was, until this catastrophe. 3-1 on. And even at short odds, enormous sums have been laid on him.
And where one man gains, another loses. So there are those with the strongest interest in preventing him being there next week.
Well, I should have thought that was obvious.
That's King's Pyland, gentlemen. Off to the west.
Very isolated establishment.
I saw another group of buildings some way back.
Capleton Stables. Lord Backwater's establishment. He owns Desborough.
That's the second favourite for the Plate. Ah.
I suppose the damned animal will walk away with it now. Scandalous.
Who runs Capleton?
A man called Silas Brown. Unlikable sort of fella.
He and the Straker couldn't stand the sight of each other.
And the two establishments are, what, 2 miles apart?
Something like that. Too damn close, if you ask me.
You value isolation, Colonel.
Of course. Secrecy is essential. Fortunes can be made and lost on inside information. The business is full of rogues, touts, spies, what have you.
Simpson is one such. I discovered he's got bets placed against Silver Blaze.
And what amount?
£5,000.
Good God.
But if this Simpson abducted my horse, what did he do with it? Where is it now?
I presume you've searched Capleton.
Of course we have.
I saw to it personally.
And?
No, good Lord, ma'am, what do you think? Not a damn trace.
Horses stable there, tack room there, trainer's house, yard paved, it's noisy. And direct access out into the moor, lanterns hung there, and there. Yeah, very good, very good. The Colonel has abandoned us, has he?
Yes, he's gone to tell Mrs. Straker we're here. He did say.
No doubt.
Do you want to speak to the stable lad?
Not yet. Where is Straker's body? Good God.
Quite, Doctor.
Repeated blows to the side of the head.
Almost the entire left side of the skull is shattered. A weighted club is a coward's weapon.
Simpson had in his possession a stick with a hollowed-out end filled with lead.
If owning a Penang lawyer makes a man a murderer, you should be out arresting a sizable portion of the population.
I do have other evidence against the man, Mr. Holmes.
Did you examine Simpson's stick?
Minutely.
And?
No traces. But he'd had ample time to clean it up.
Of course, yes. So are there any other wounds?
On the left thigh.
The thigh. Fascinating, Doctor.
It's a perfectly Clean cut. And not particularly deep.
That's hardly consistent with the savagery to the head.
No, not in the least. Did Simpson have a knife on him when you arrested him?
No, but Straker was grasping a knife when he was found.
Indeed, in which hand?
The right. It was clotted with blood. My first thought was that he defended himself vigorously.
Does Simpson bear any injuries?
No. So I'm forced to assume that Straker injured himself in his fall.
Inspector, altering your theory to fit in with a preconceived conclusion.
Actually, it is quite possible. After a massive injury to the brain, there's often convulsive struggling, thrashing about. I think he may well have inflicted that cut on himself.
Thank you, Doctor. Sorry, Mr. Holmes.
No, don't be. I have no preconceived theory to upset. Yes, the fingers of the left hand have been straightened after death. What was he holding in that hand?
A silk muffler, striped in red and black. Both the maidservant and the stable lad are ready to swear that Simpson was wearing it that night.
Quiet, King! Down, boy! I'm sorry about that, gentlemen.
It's of no matter. This is the table where you ate your supper?
Yes, sir.
And it was through this window that the maidservant handed you the tray.
Edith, yes, sir.
Edith, yes. Let me see. It's too small for an entrance.
How are you feeling now, Ned?
Oh, bright as ninepence, thank you, sir. Though they had the devil's own judge wake me up Tuesday morning, I'm told.
Have you identified the drug that was used?
Powdered opium.
Powdered opium. Did all the household eat the same dish?
Excellent, Watson.
They did, Doctor. No ill effects.
And the dish what?
Curried mutton, sir.
The maid Edith will testify that Simpson was carrying a folded packet made of white paper. He said to her, make sure the lad has this tonight.
Oh, how did Simpson explain that?
And he says it was a £10 note.
And presumably he claims it was to bribe young Ned here into giving him inside information.
He did say, sir, as he could put some money into my pocket.
Thank you, Ned.
Nonetheless, a paper packet is exactly the sort of container powdered opium would be in. Shall I bring in the maid now?
No. I'd like to see what Straker had in his pockets.
Here you are, gentlemen.
Let me see. A box of Vestas, pipe, sealskin pouch with half an ounce of long-cut Cavendish, silver stopwatch, some papers, and... Well. I presume from bloodstains that this is the knife you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
Yes, not exactly what I was expecting. It's something in your line, surely, Doctor. Here.
Yes, indeed. This is what we call a cataract knife. You see how small and fine the blade is? It's only used for the most delicate work.
Curious choice for a weapon.
There are all sorts of knives to be found in stables like this. Straker just grabbed the nearest one to hand when he set off after Simpson.
Yes, very possibly. Now, these papers. Account from a hay merchant. Instructions from Colonel Ross. Now, what's this? Madame Lazurier of Bond Street, London. Also your department, Watson?
Thank you very much. Well, it's a dressmaker's account for £37.15. It's actually made out to a William Derbyshire.
So Mrs. Derbyshire has expensive tastes. May I keep this for a short while, Inspector?
You think it important?
Considerably. Colonel Ross.
Holmes.
And you must be Mrs. Straker.
Yes, sir.
Please accept our sincere condolences. Allow me.
Thank you.
I have explained to Mrs. Straker why you're here, gentlemen.
Forgive me, madam, but certain questions must be asked.
Of course. I'll help you all I can.
Thank you. On which side of this house is your bedroom?
Mr. Holmes, that cannot be relevant.
Colonel, please. Mrs. Straker.
At the front of the house.
So your bedroom window looks across the yard to the stables?
Yes.
Yes. On the night of the tragedy, you heard nothing untoward?
Nothing, sir. Nothing at all.
No one heard the least disturbance, Mr. Holmes.
That's enough now, Holmes.
One last point.
Yes.
Who is Mr. William Derbyshire? Madam?
He's a friend of my husband's. A close friend. John spoke of him from time to time.
And you have met him?
No, he lives in London.
According to the maidservant, Derbyshire's letters are occasionally addressed here.
Well, that explains everything. I thank you for your patience, Mrs. Straker.
Sir.
Oh, one final thing. Surely I met you in Plymouth some little time ago.
Mr. Holmes?
At a garden party.
A garden party? No, sir,
I could
no.
have sworn that you wore a costume of dove-coloured silk with ostrich feather trimming.
Oh, I never had such a dress, sir.
Oh, well, that quite settles it. My apologies.
Holmes, that was an outrageous display of insensitivity.
But quite illuminating and therefore necessary.
You may think so.
Inspector, shall we go to the murder site while the light still lasts?
By all means.
I shall endeavour to calm Mrs. Straker.
I was about to suggest exactly that.
This is the spot, gentlemen. Straker's coat was on the tree out there. The lads who found it thought he might have blown there, but in fact, it had been quite deliberately hung on a low branch.
A point of some importance, I fancy. Watson, note this location. Significant, is it not?
Well, it's only a short walk away from the stables.
Yes, it is. But can you see the stable buildings from here?
Well, no, we're in a hollow.
Well, exactly. And we're standing precisely where the body was found, Inspector.
Yes, sir. I had that matting placed there to preserve any markings.
Ah, excellent.
I brought along one of the boots which Straker wore, one of Fitzroy Simpson's shoes, and a cast horseshoe of Silver Blaze.
My dear Inspector, you surpass yourself.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Pray, let me see. Yeah. Yes, good. Good. Now, stand back, if you please. Excuse me, gentlemen.
Look at that. It's as if nothing in the world exists for him but that one patch of ground. I believe I could let off a pistol and he wouldn't notice it.
He's transformed when he's in a situation like this. Look at his eyes.
I tell you, Doctor, I've been an admirer of his methods for some time, but actually to see him at work, it's an education.
Oh, your own approach to the job strikes me as admirably clear and logical, Inspector.
Well, thank you, Doctor. That's very gratifying. And I have to say it, I can't help thinking that the facts in this case seem to speak for themselves.
Your net certainly seems to be tightly drawn around Fitzroy Simpson.
What have you got, Mr. Holmes?
Look.
A candle stout.
I say we have more time. We can also find a vesta used to light it.
I've been all over this site. I can't think how I managed to overlook anything.
Yeah, it was invisible, buried in the mud. I only found it because I was looking for it.
You expected to find it?
Yes, I thought it not unlikely.
Mr. Holmes, is something wrong?
Forgive me, Inspector. No, nothing at all. It's true that despite your precautions, there's little to read here.
I was afraid of that.
It's not important. There may be tracks elsewhere.
Well, the higher ground's too hard and dry. I've examined very carefully for 100 yards in each direction.
Well, then I wouldn't have the impertinence to do it again.
Yes,
I would like to take a little walk over the moors before it grows dark.
A walk?
Yes, I think so. What do you say, Watson?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, splendid. Well, then we'll see you back at the stables, Inspector. Oh, and if you don't mind, I'll take the horseshoe with me. For luck. Your leg holding up, Watson?
Yes, never a twinge.
Thank you.
What a magnificent view.
Let's stop here for a moment.
Yes, certainly. Look at the way that plain is tinged with gold. And the ruddy brown where the fern and the brambles catch the last rays of the sun. It's beautiful. And I don't want to hear a word from you about romantic rubbish. It is beautiful. I wish I could paint.
I do hope your present rose-coloured optimism isn't going to be too rudely shattered by the realities of married life.
Are you still on about that? I know it amuses you to see me as a sort of overgrown, lovesick schoolboy, but don't you have more important matters to think about just at the moment?
You believe that Gregory's solution is correct?
Yes, I do. His case is very well argued. Simpson has a considerable financial interest in the disappearance of the favourite. He had clear access to the stable lad's meal through that window. He was armed with a heavy stick, and his muffler was found in the dead man's hand. That business with the paper packet...
Yeah, a clever counsel would tear it all to rags. The muffler was lost on the moor, the stick is a perfectly common item. He leaned in the window to look at the animal no more, and the packet was exactly what he claimed it to be, a £10 note.
Well then, what's your case?
I have none.
Then aren't you being a trifle hasty in dismissing Gregory?
Oh, I have the solution.
You know who the murderer is?
Yes, but I have no case because I have no proof. I have a number of loose threads, but nothing to bind them together. Yes, I've overlooked something that's been staring me in the face.
Something you've seen?
Heard, something of vital significance. Something spoken. Who have I talked to since we arrived?
Let me have a look. In order, it would have been Colonel Ross. No, Inspector Gregory first, then Ross, then the stable lad Ned, then Mrs. Straker. That's it. Do you want me to go over the main points of the conversation?
Gregory, Ross... Fool!
I beg your pardon?
Fool, fool, fool!
Holmes!
Me, my dear fellow, me, not you.
Oh.
How could I possibly have overlooked so obvious a clue? You see what your precious fresh air does to my brain.
What clue, for goodness sake?
The immense significance of the curried mutton.
What?
One pull on that final thread and all the other strands are drawn into a knot. I have the facts and I have the proof. Only one question still remains to be answered.
And that is?
The location of the horse.
You don't know where the horse is? When you said you'd sold it, I thought you meant everything.
They were together in that hollow, in the dark. The murder was committed and Silver Blaze broke away.
Broke away? Why didn't the murderer stop him?
Yes, excellent question. Once you realize the motive behind the murder, the answer will present itself.
The motive is obvious.
Is it? Yes. What sort of creature is a horse? Huh? Up out of the hollow, scenting the air. Yes. Most of the ground around here is hard and would have held no impressions, even in Monday's rain. But if I'm correct... That next hollow.
What about it?
I'll show you. Come on. On the night of the murder, this hollow must have been as soft and muddy as the one where the murder was committed.
So must every other hollow on Dartmoor. What's so significant about this one?
Look.
By God.
And the horseshoe fits exactly.
For luck. How in the world did you know?
Well, you see, the value of imagination. That is the one quality which Gregory lacks. I imagined what might have happened, acted on the supposition, and found myself justified. There, and there. Well.
You see these broken bushes? It looks as though he climbed out of the hollow up to that plain.
Back towards King's Pylon, stopped and turned. Yes, my dear fellow, exactly as I expected.
How can we follow the tracks once the horse reaches the hard ground?
We can't, but it's not important.
Not important? But he could have wandered off anywhere.
No, I think not.
So where did he go? You're not going to tell me, are you?
How's the light? Just time, I think.
For what, pray?
For obtaining some expert advice.
What the devil do you want here?
Nothing that justifies such an ill-mannered reception. Are you Silas Brown, trainer to Lord Backwater?
What if I am? Be off with you, you pair of touts.
Now, just a moment.
All right, Watson. What I want is 10 minutes talk with you, my good sir.
I've no time to talk to every gadabout. Be off.
About last Monday night, or early Tuesday morning, if you prefer.
You watch what you're saying. I'm no killer.
I don't believe I mentioned the murder.
I won't ask you again. What do you want?
Your help.
My help? Why should I help you?
Because if you do, I may well feel inclined to return the favor, and if you don't...
There's too many prying ears out here. This way.
Watson, wait here. Don't let anyone disturb us.
Are you coming or not? I'm a busy man.
I shan't need more than a few minutes.
You're doing what?
We are returning to London by the midnight express. We've had a charming little breath of your beautiful Dartmoor air, but now we must depart.
Mr. Holmes, Doctor.
Sorry, Inspector. You know as much as I do.
So, you're giving up. You despair of arresting the murderer of poor Straker.
There are certainly grave difficulties in the way.
And the horse? What about the race? Since you can offer me no hope, I urge the public to withdraw Silver Blaze's name from the entries.
Absolutely not. He must let the name stand.
Yes, well, I'm very glad to have your opinion, sir.
I have every hope that your horse will be there at the fall of the flag next Tuesday.
Have you indeed?
And I plan to be there to see him run. I suggest that you have your jockey in readiness. Inspector, a word with you outside.
Straight away, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, Colonel, I trust you've no objection to giving us a ride back into Tavistock. Thank you so much.
Well, Doctor, I must say I'm disappointed in our London consultant. I don't see that we're any further advanced than when he came.
At least you have his assurance that your horse will run.
Yes, I have his assurance. I should prefer to have the horse.
Easy, girl. Easy. There you go.
Do you have a photograph of Straker?
Yes, I do. Here.
My dear Gregory, you anticipate all my wants. Good evening, Ned.
Sir? Inspector? Mr. Holmes?
Yes, Ned.
Look, sir, I know it's not my place, and if the Colonel catches me talking...
I'm sure we can rely on the inspector here to keep a lookout.
Certainly, Mr. Holmes.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, it's Silver Blaze. The other lads are saying... Well, has that villain Simpson really done away with him? Because if he hasn't...
Ned, you need have no fears. Please believe me. Colonel Watson. Climb aboard.
You're damnably free and easy with my carriage, Holmes.
After you, Inspector.
Thank you, Doctor.
Well, for heaven's sake, Holmes, are you coming or not?
One moment, Colonel. Ned.
Sir?
Those few sheep in the paddock. Who looks after them?
I do, sir.
Have you noticed anything amiss with them of late?
Well, sir, it's not of much account.
Go on.
But 3 of them has gone lame, sir.
A long shot, Watson. A very long shot. Thank you, Ned.
Sir.
Have you finished? May we depart?
Gregory, let me recommend to your attention this singular epidemic among the sheep.
You really consider that to be important?
Exceedingly so.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Is there any other point you wish to draw to my attention?
A curious incident of the dog in the nighttime.
But the dog did nothing in the nighttime.
That was the curious incident. Drive on.
Silver Blaze! 72 Desborough! 72 Desborough! 6-1 pugilist! 7-1!
Holmes, this is ridiculous.
Surely not.
You've told me all the rest. Why not the final detail?
My dear chap, I thought you'd enjoy the chance to work it out for yourself. Come with me, and all shall be made clear.
Out you come, boy. Easy, boy. Easy.
Good day to you.
Mr. Holmes, sir.
You remember my associate, Dr. Watson?
Sir?
Mr. Brown.
Any problems?
None, sir. Everything's to hand, just as you ordered.
Pleased to hear it. This seems to be a splendid beast. Your expert opinion, Watson.
I take it this is Desborough. Magnificent.
You wouldn't say that he's been ill-treated or deprived in any way?
Ill-treated? I've rarely seen a finer-looking animal. But why should you think he...
Brown, Colonel Ross will be joining us here shortly.
You haven't told him?
He knows nothing.
I swear to you, my first thought was to do what was right. God's truth.
So I saw. But then the devil came into you when you thought of how much money could be made. Watson, Brown claims to be a reformed man. Your testimony would appear to support him.
I'm not sure that I'd be willing to pledge his good behavior in the future.
Well, we shall just have to see. Silas Brown, you've kept your end of the bargain, so I shall keep mine. Be off with you, and be sure that our paths never cross again.
God save you, sir. You too, Doctor. You can rely on me.
I doubt it.
There they are. Prepare yourself for the final act, Doctor.
I don't think Colonel Ross will share your amusement.
Perhaps not. Good day to you, Colonel. Inspector Gregory.
Mr. Holmes. Doctor.
Mr. Holmes, I have seen nothing of my horse. At your insistence...
That's my suggestion.
I have allowed Silver Blaze's name to stand and my jockey to be weighed. Do you realize what penalties I shall face when the horse doesn't appear? By God, I'll sue you for every penny you possess.
Tell me, Colonel, what do you know Silver Blaze when you saw him?
I, sir, have been on the turf for 20 years, and never have I been asked such a damn fool question. Know my own horse, indeed? Sir, your services are dispensed with. This nonsense has gone on quite long enough.
I agree. Let us have no more nonsense. You engaged me to find Silver Blaze. I have done so.
What? Then where the devil is he?
Before you.
Good God, man, that's not my horse. That beast hasn't a white hair on his body.
Watson, be so good as to pass me that bucket.
Yeah, certainly.
Mr. Holmes, What's the meaning of this?
Oh, bear with him, Inspector. I think I can see where this is all leading. Well done, Watson.
Well, I'm damned if I can.
Observe closely, gentlemen. This bucket contains spirits of wine. An excellent and versatile liquid. Easy boy. Ideally suited for the removal of nearly all types of... hold his head steady, Watson. Nearly all types of... paint and dye.
Well, I'm damned.
Bravo, Holmes.
Wonderful.
Mr. Holmes,
Colonel.
you take my breath away. Silver Blaze! Come on, Silver Blaze! Come on, Silver Blaze! On the paper! That's the way, go!
Well, did you enjoy a bit of fun at the Colonel's expense?
Yes, I did. And don't try to tell me he didn't deserve it.
Did I say anything of the sort? I still think you might have told me, though. How did you know?
Oh, you remember that muddy hollow near to Capleton? While you were off examining your broken bushes, I found clear traces of a man's footsteps. He saw the horse wandering loose, ran up to it and led it away. It had to be Brown, and one look at his boots confirmed it. I'd more or less decided that he had it anyway. A horse is a gregarious creature. Its instinct is always to seek out its own kind.
Really?
Watson, before the others join us, a favour.
Yeah, of course.
When you write this one up, be sure to do full justice to that scene. Mr. Holmes, you take my breath away.
Oh, so my writing does have some value, then.
Have I ever doubted it? Colonel, congratulations.
Mr. Holmes, I owe you 1,000 apologies for having doubted your ability.
Colonel, I accept your apologies. Did you enjoy the race, Inspector?
I did, sir. Very rewarding.
How about you, Ned?
Wonderful, Doctor. It's great to see him again. Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
My pleasure.
Now then, lad, get a blanket on that horse, and then you can cut along and enjoy yourself.
Thank you, sir. Come on, Blaze.
Good lad, that. Potential. Get back here by 5, mind.
Sir?
Mr. Holmes, you've done me a great service by recovering my horse. You would do me a greater still if you could lay your hands on the murderer of John Straker.
I have done so.
You've got him.
Who is he? Where is he?
You had all the threads in your hand, Inspector. You failed only to tie them together. And this was a case where the art of the reasoner lay in sifting the fine details rather than uncovering new evidence. Details such as the drug used on the stable lad.
Powdered opium. But why was that significant?
Because it's by no means tasteless. In most dishes, it would be immediately detectable.
But the supper that night was curried mutton, as the poisoner must have known it was going to be. That one point alone totally eliminated Fitzroy Simpson. Then there was the question of the dog. I pointed that out to you.
I thought you were talking nonsense. The dog that did nothing.
The dog that did not bark. No one reported hearing any disturbance that night. The dog didn't bark, so...
So, whoever took the horse was someone the dog knew well.
Exactly.
Mr. Holmes, I do not like where this is leading.
Nonetheless, Colonel, it is the truth. John Straker himself was at the center of the crime. He was a man wholly unworthy of your trust. On the night of the murder, Straker waited until he knew that Ned would be unconscious. Then he unlocked the stables with his own key and led Silver Blaze out into the moor. On the way, he found Simpson's muffler, lost in its owner's earlier flight, and picked it up, probably thinking he could use it to secure the horse. He hung his coat on a tree to give himself more freedom of movement, led the horse into a hollow, out of sight and earshot of the buildings, and lit the stub of a candle so he could see to carry out his plan.
But what plan? What was all this for?
Remember the knife found in the dead man's hand? A surgical instrument. Very fine and delicate.
It was to be used for a most delicate operation that night. Such a knife could be inserted subcutaneously, leaving absolutely no trace, and used to make the merest nick on the tendons of the horse's leg.
The villain, the damned scoundrel. The poor horse would be no more than slightly lamed. His losing today we put down to a muscle strain or something equally minor.
But never to foul play. Something else I pointed out. Straker knew he would only have one chance. He couldn't risk this tendon nicking going wrong. You recall my long shot.
Oh, the sheep. The lame sheep. By God, he'd been practicing.
Exactly. Well done, Inspector.
But why? Why did he want to ruin me?
He didn't, Colonel. Not directly.
This is the final loose thread. A £37 walking outfit from Madame Lazurier of Bond Street. Mrs. Straker's explanation of Mr. William Derbyshire did not convince me. Men do not carry other people's bills about in their pockets, and you observed her manner when I mentioned the name.
Well, I put it down to her grief.
No, it is more than that. I believe that she had already divined the truth about her husband and Mr. Derbyshire, possibly some time ago. Women can be surprisingly resilient creatures.
What are you saying?
Straker and Derbyshire were one and the same. He was leading a double life.
One involving another woman.
As you told us yourself, Colonel, of his frequent trips to London.
Oh, God.
Madame Lazurier recognized Mr. Derbyshire at once from our photograph of Straker. An excellent customer whose dashing wife has a strong partiality for extremely expensive dresses.
I've no doubt that this woman led Straker head over heels into debt and straight into the welcoming arms of the moneylender.
I take it we must assume we had bets laid against Silver Blaze.
Bets that must certainly have been placed with even more borrowed cash. It was a desperate scheme.
The fool. Why couldn't he have come to me? I've lost the best trainer I ever had.
But the murderer, Mr. Holmes. Who is the murderer? Straker may have been a villain, but murder cannot go unpunished.
You ask me, the fellow did me a favor. Getting to Straker before he had a chance to injure my horse. I'll give him a medal.
Colonel Ross, we're talking about a crime of the utmost seriousness. Now, Mr. Holmes, it can only have been another member of the Colonel's staff. But who? One of the lads? Surely not the maid.
No, not the maid. The murderer of John Straker is here now.
Here? Where?
In my company at the present moment.
Mr. Holmes, that is either a very bad joke or an insult.
Not you, Colonel. The murderer is standing just over there.
Good God. The horse.
The horse. They were there together in the darkness, and he undoubtedly sensed Straker's own tension and fear. Perhaps it was the sudden glare of the match, or that strange instinct that animals have when danger is near, whatever the cause. As Straker bent to his miserable task, Silver Blaze lashed out and killed him with a single blow.
Wonderful. Wonderful. You might have been there.
It was a privilege to listen to that, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you.
Wait. You've explained all but one thing.
What's that, Colonel?
Where exactly was the horse?
It bolted and was found wandering on the moor and cared for by one of your neighbors. We must have an amnesty in that direction, I think.
Very well. What matters is that Silver Blaze is home once more.
And as for delivering the murderer to justice, well, no court in the land would declare him guilty. The verdict must clearly be self-defense.
In Silver Blaze, Sherlock Holmes was played by Clive Merrison and Dr. Watson by Michael Williams, with Jack May as Colonel Ross. Inspector Gregory was played by Terence Edmund, John Straker by Fraser Carr, Mrs. Straker by Susan Sheridan, Silas Brown by Brett Usher, Fitzroy Simpson by Nigel Carrington, Ned by Mark Straker, and Edith by Petra Markham. Other parts were played by members of the cast. The violinist was Leonard Friedman. Silver Blaze was dramatized for radio by Bert Coules and directed by Patrick Rayner.
I have kept this secret from my husband for 3 years now. 3 years that seem to me a lifetime, and which I can bear no longer. You must believe me when I say I have struggled to put the past and all it means to me out of my life. But I find my struggle is all in vain, and I now have an overpowering desire to be once again with the one I love so dearly, where we can be together once more, and hopefully put an end to this heartache which causes such pain and makes of my life a sham. Alice?
Yes, Ma'am?
There's a letter I would like you to post.
The Yellow Face by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Dramatised for radio by Jerry Jones. With Clive Merrison as Sherlock Holmes and Michael Williams as Dr. John Watson. And featuring Joan Matheson as Mrs. Hudson, Mark Straker as Grant Munro, and Helena Breck as Effie Munro. The Yellow Face.
More whiskey, Holmes?
No, thank you, Watson. Kind of you, but I've drunk more than enough.
Excuse my asking, but, anything wrong?
In what way wrong?
Well, I hesitate to say, but you look unwell, Holmes.
Do I indeed?
Not unwell, are you?
No, Watson, I am not unwell. At least not what is normally meant by the term.
Then what...
Bored is what I am, my dear fellow. When I'm between cases, I feel bored. Bored to my very bones. Bored.
And perhaps another drink would help.
Oh, very well. If only to halt your needless concern.
Like a drink when you're down in the dumps.
Except for cocaine, Watson.
Well...
That is the magic potion that gives me glimpses of paradise.
And brings you down to earth with a bump.
Like love, I'm told.
Yeah. Strange business, love. Nothing lasts, they say.
They're right, Watson. Nothing is forever. Though boredom, I must say, gives a remarkably good impression of it.
Holmes, I have a suggestion to make.
Can I help you, sir?
I wish to speak to Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
I'm afraid Mr. Holmes is not in at the moment, sir.
Blast!
But he will be returning, sir.
Do you know how long he will be?
I'm afraid not, sir. Mr. Holmes's schedule is somewhat erratic at the moment.
May I wait for him in his room?
Certainly, sir. Please come in.
I should have known better than allow you to coax me into a stroll in the park, Watson. Let us sit down for a moment.
Just look about you, Holmes. You must admit those trees are quite beautiful.
Only if you will admit that relentless beauty can be devastatingly dull.
Dull? This?
You hardly know the meaning of the word, do you? I envy you, my dear fellow. I'm bored, and you walk constantly in wonder.
I must say, Holmes, I shall certainly be glad when a new case comes your way. Very glad indeed.
So will I. Oh, so will I.
It's always the same. If you're not solving some mystery or other, you don't seem to be alive.
Because I'm not. Cases are my reason, my only real reason for living. If you will not promise to love forever, said the man to his lady love, what is the point of forever?
I still think the view beautiful from here.
Yes? What's it like at midnight?
Oh, cheer up, old friend. Something will happen.
Of course. It always does.
Here we are, sir. Please take a seat.
Thank you. Is it all right if I smoke my pipe?
I'm sure that is perfectly acceptable, sir. As you can see, Mr. Holmes is quite something of a pipe smoker himself. Now, you just sit down and relax, sir. I'm sure he'll not be too long.
Relax. So easy to say. How can I relax?
I must advise you, Watson, and I do it with all sincerity, should you ever in the future suggest a visit to the zoological gardens, I shall screech louder than any known monkey.
But many of the animals are interesting, you have to admit.
Let them from their cages, then they would be interesting.
Well, yes.
And now I suggest we release ourselves.
Another walk?
Yes. Home.
Oh, sir, you're leaving.
I certainly am. It seems he's never going to come.
I'm sure you'll only need to wait a little longer, sir.
Then I'll wait in the open air. I feel half choked.
I really am sorry, sir, but as I said, Mr. Holmes's activities at the moment...
Yes, I know, but I'm stifled. I must get some air.
As you wish, sir. I'm sure Mr. Holmes will be sorry to have missed you.
Yes. Well, I'll be back before long.
I'll let him know when he returns, sir.
To be frank with you, Watson, and I'm fully aware that you've been doing everything with the best of intentions, I find walking an act of pleasure completely without interest. I appreciate your concern for my welfare, but moving the muscles without purpose is quite meaningless.
So it would be no use my suggesting an art gallery?
Oh, no, none whatsoever. I intend to go home and do nothing but sit, read, smoke, and sleep.
Sorry, Holmes. I've been making some rather miserable suggestions, haven't I?
No, Watson. It's just that you've been making them to a rather miserable man.
Excuse me, Mr. Holmes, but there was a gentleman earlier wishing to speak to you.
So much for afternoon walks, Watson. Has this gentleman gone, then, Mrs. Hudson?
Yes, sir.
Oh, didn't you ask him in?
Yes, sir, he came in.
How long did he wait?
Half an hour, sir.
Tell me, Mrs. Hudson, did you notice anything particular about him?
Well, he was tall, sir, quietly dressed in a dark grey suit and carried a brown wide-awake in his hand. I should put him at somewhere in his 30s.
Oh, so much for his appearance. Now for his state of mind. How are your powers of observation on that score, Mrs. Hudson?
Oh, he was much agitated and very restless. I could hear him walking and stamping about in your room all the time he was here.
Sorry you missed him, Holmes.
He did say he would return, Doctor.
Oh, thank heavens for that.
And quite soon now, I should think.
Good. Well, all is not lost. Well done, Mrs. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Come, Watson, we'll have a smoke and await our visitor.
I say, old chap, you'll make a detective of Mrs. Hudson yet.
Yes, indeed. Even if she will only match Lestrade in noticing the obvious. Still very annoying there, Watson.
Yes. You're badly in need of a case, and the man's impatience makes this affair appear of some importance.
Indeed. Yes, well, we shall see. Hello. That's not your pipe on the table. Must have left his behind. Yeah. A nice old briar with a good long stem of what the tobacconists call amber.
So it is. Well. I wonder how many real amber mouthpieces there are in London.
You know, some people think a fly in it is a good sign.
Really?
Yes. It's quite a branch of the trade, the putting of sham flies into the sham amber. Well, he must have been disturbed in his mind to leave a pipe behind, which he evidently values highly.
How do you know he values it highly?
Well, I should put the original cost of the pipe at, 7 and 6pence. Now, it has, you see, been twice mended, once in the wooden stem and once in the amber. Each of these mends done, as you observe, with silver bands. Must have cost more than the pipe did originally. The man must value the pipe highly when he prefers to patch it up rather than buy a new one for the same money.
Well, I say.
Then he's bitten through his amber. It takes a muscular, energetic fellow and one with a good set of teeth to do that. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I hear him upon the stair. So we shall have something more interesting than the pipe to study.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I suppose I should have knocked. Yes, of course I should have knocked. The fact is I am a little upset, and I ask you to put my bad manners down to that.
I quite understand. May I introduce my colleague and confidant, Dr. Watson?
Good day. How do you do?
Now, I suggest you put your hat on the table. Yes, and take that chair.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I can see that you've not slept for a night or two. That tries a man's patience more than work and even more than pleasure.
Yes,
May I ask how I can help you?
I want your advice, sir. I don't know what to do, and my whole life seems to have gone to pieces.
You wish to employ me as a consulting detective?
Not that only. I want your opinion as a judicious man, a man of the world. I want to know what I ought to do next. It's a very delicate thing. One does not like to speak of one's domestic affairs to strangers. It seems dreadful to discuss the conduct of one's wife with two men whom I have never met before.
Your wife?
We are, as you will gather, the soul of discretion.
Your reputation leads me to know that. I've got to the end of my tether and I must have advice.
My dear Mr. Grant Munro...
What? You know my name?
If you wish to preserve your incognito, I suggest that you cease to write your name upon the lining of your hat, or else you turn the crown towards the person whom you're addressing. However, I was about to say that my friend and I have listened to many strange cases in this room, and that we've had the good fortune to bring peace of mind to many troubled souls. I trust we may do as much for you.
Oh, I trust you may.
Might I beg you, as time may prove to be of importance, to furnish me with the facts of your case without further delay?
The facts are these, Mr. Holmes. I am a married man, and have been so for 3 years. During that time, my wife and I have loved each other as fondly and lived as happily as any two that were ever joined. But now, since last Monday, there has suddenly sprung up a barrier between us, and I find that there is something in her life and in her thoughts of which I know as little as if she were the woman who brushes by me in the street. We are estranged, and I want to know why.
And what is your reason for this certainty?
There is one thing I want to impress upon you before I go any further, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, which is?
Effie loves me.
Of this you are quite sure.
Oh, don't let there be any mistake about that, Doctor. She loves me with her whole heart and soul, and never more so than now. I don't want to argue about that. A man can tell easily enough when a woman loves him.
Indeed he can.
But there is this secret between us, and we can never be the same until it is clear.
Kindly let me have the facts, Mr. Munro.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'll tell you what I know of Effie's history. She was a widow when I first met her, though she was only 25. Her name then was Mrs. Hebron. She had gone out to America when she was young and had lived in the town of Atlanta, where she married this Hebron, who was a lawyer with a good practice. They had one child. But the yellow fever broke out badly in the place, and both husband and child died of it. I have seen the death certificate. They sickened her of America, and she came back to live with a maiden aunt at Pinner, in Middlesex.
Where you met her?
Yes. She had only been there 6 months. We fell in love and were married in a few weeks afterwards.
May I inquire as to your financial situation?
Her husband had left her well provided for, and she had a capital of about £4,500, which had been so well invested by him that it returned an average of 7%.
And your own circumstances?
I am a hop merchant myself, and as I have an income of £700 or £800, we found ourselves comfortably off and took a nice £8 a year villa at Norbury.
Ah, charming area, Norbury.
Yes, and our little place was very countrified, considering that it is so close to town. There is an inn, 2 houses a little above us, and a single cottage at the other side of the field which faces us. And except those, there are no other houses until you get halfway to the station. My business takes me into town at certain seasons, but in summer I have less to do, and then, in our country house, my wife and I have been as happy as could be wished.
And now perhaps...
Yes, if you would. My colleague is a little anxious for you to bring your story to the present.
There's one thing I ought to tell you before I go further.
Which is?
When we married, my wife made over all her property to me, rather against my will, for I saw how awkward it would be if my business affairs went wrong.
But she insisted?
She would have it no other way, and it was done. Well, about 6 weeks ago, she came to me and said...
Jack, when you took my money, you said that if ever I wanted any, I was to ask you for it.
Certainly. It's all your own. What do you require? £5? 10? 20?
No, Jack. I want £100.
What on earth for?
Now then, Jack, you said you were only my banker.
Yes, that's right.
Well, bankers do not ask questions.
Well, if you really mean it, yes. Of course you can have the money.
Oh, yes, I really mean it.
And you won't tell me why you need it?
Someday, perhaps. Someday.
We don't usually have secrets between us.
I am sorry. I wish it could be otherwise.
Very well. I'll write you a cheque. £100 it shall be. That may have nothing to do with what came afterwards, but I thought it only right to mention it.
Quite so. Details are of the essence. Pray continue.
Well, I told you just now that there is a cottage not far from our house. There is just a field between us, but to reach it you have to go along the road and then turn down a lane. Just beyond it is a nice little grove of Scotch firs, and I used to be very fond of strolling down there, for trees are always neighbourly kinds of things.
Yes, they give me much pleasure, even in the London parks.
All right, Watson, point taken.
Well, the cottage had been standing empty this 8 months, and it was a pity, for it is a pretty 2-storey place. Well, last Monday evening, I was taking a stroll down that way when I met an empty van coming up the lane and saw a pile of carpets and things lying about on the grass plot beside the porch. It was clear that the cottage had at last been let. I walked past it and then, stopping, as an idle man might, I ran my eye over it and wondered what sort of folk they were who come to live so near us. And as I looked, I suddenly became aware that a face was watching me from one of the upper windows.
This clearly distressed you.
Well, yes, dreadfully. I don't know what there was about it, Mr. Holmes, but it seemed to send a chill right down my back. I was some little way off, so that I could not make out the features, but there was something unnatural and inhuman about the face. Well, that was the impression I had, and I moved quickly forwards to get a nearer view of the person who was watching me. But as I did so, the face suddenly disappeared. so suddenly that it seemed to have been plucked away into the darkness of the room. I stood for 5 minutes thinking the business over and trying to analyse my impression.
Was the face of a man or a woman?
I could not tell, but the colour was what impressed me most.
The colour?
It was of a livid, dead yellow, and with something set and rigid about it.
Jaundice, perhaps?
I think not. It was shockingly unnatural, and so disturbed was I that I determined to see a little more of the new inmates of the cottage.
What may you be wanting?
I'm your neighbour. My wife and I live in that house opposite.
Well, and what you want with us?
I see that you have only just moved in, so I thought that if I could be of any help to you in any way...
Right, aye. We'll just ask you when we want you. Good night.
Annoyed at the churlish rebuff, I turned my back and walked home. All evening, though I tried to think of other things, my mind would still turn to the apparition at the window and the rudeness of the woman.
Did you say nothing of this to your wife?
No. She is nervous and highly strung, and I had no wish that she should share the unpleasant impression which had been produced upon myself.
A wise decision.
I remarked to her, however, before I fell asleep, that the cottage was now occupied. She made no reply. I am an extremely sound sleeper, but I slept much more lightly than usual. Half in my dreams, I was dimly conscious that something was going on in the room, and gradually became aware that my wife had dressed herself and was slipping on her mantle and her bonnet. She was deadly pale and breathing fast, glancing furtively towards the bed to see if she disturbed me. Then, thinking that I was still asleep, she slipped from the room, and an instant later I heard a sharp creaking, which could only have come from the hinges of the front door. I sat up in bed, then took my watch from under the pillow. It was 3 a.m.
Good Lord.
What on earth could my wife be doing out on the country road at that hour?
To what conclusion did you come?
I had sat for about 20 minutes turning the thing over in my mind, trying to find some possible explanation. The more I thought, the more inexplicable did it appear. I was still puzzling it over when I heard the door gently close again, and her footsteps coming up the stairs. She gave a violent start and a kind of gasping cry when she saw that I was awake. And that cry and start troubled me more than all the rest, for there was something indescribably guilty about them. Where in the world have you been, Effie?
Jack, you're awake. I thought nothing in the world would awake you.
Answer my question. Where have you been?
You used to say you slept the sleep of
Where have you been?
Please, Jack. I can understand how surprised you must be.
Answer the question.
I've never done anything like this before. It's just... Well, you see...
Yes?
Well, I felt as though I was choking. I had a desperate need for a breath of fresh air. If I had not gone outside, I really would have fainted. I stood at the door for a few minutes. I'm quite myself again. You have no need for concern.
All the time she was telling me this story, she never once looked in my direction, and her voice was quite unlike her usual tones. It was evident to me that what she was saying was false.
Did you pursue her on the point?
No. I turned my face to the wall, sick at heart. My mind filled with 1,000 venomous doubts and suspicions. All the rest of the night I tossed and tumbled, framing theory after theory, each more unlikely than the last.
And when morning came?
My wife seemed as upset as myself, and I could see from her questioning glances that she knew I disbelieved her statement and that she was at her wit's end.
Is there something wrong with your breakfast, dear?
No, nothing wrong.
But you're hardly...
I'm not hungry.
Would you like more toast?
I have to go to the city this morning.
But you haven't...
Time I was going.
Jack?
Yes?
Nothing. It was nothing.
I see. However, Mr. Holmes, I was too disturbed in my mind to think of business matters, so I was back in Norbury by 1 o'clock. It happened that my way home took me past the cottage, and I stopped for a moment to look at the windows, wondering if by chance I might once again see the face I had seen the day before. To my surprise, the door of the cottage suddenly opened. It was nothing, however, to my surprise on seeing who it was that emerged.
Jack, I've just been to see if I could be of any assistance to our new neighbours. Why do you look at me that way?
So this is where you went on leaving your bed?
What do you mean? I've never been here before.
How can you stand there telling me what you know to be false?
Jack...
Your voice, your face, everything about you changes as you speak.
Jack, don't be angry with me.
When have I ever had a secret from you? Well, I'm going into the cottage. I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
No. Oh, no, Jack, for God's sake.
Let go of my arm.
I beg you not to do this. I swear that I will tell you everything one day.
Too late.
Jack, nothing but misery can come if you enter that cottage.
I'm going in.
No, Jack. Trust me. In God's name, trust me. Trust me only this once, and I swear you will never have cause to regret it. Our whole lives are at stake in this. If you come home with me now, all will be well. If you enter that cottage, all is over between us.
You are asking a great deal of me, Effie.
I'm asking for the only thing I can ask for. Your trust.
Very well. I will trust you on one condition, and one condition only. That this mystery comes to an end from this very moment. You are at liberty to keep your secret, but you must promise me there shall be no more nightly visits, no more behaviour which is kept from me.
Oh, Jack, I will do anything you ask, anything. I promise, believe me, I promise.
Very well. Let us say no more.
Now let's go back to the house, my dear. Come on, let us go back. Let us get away from here.
As we made our way from the cottage, I looked back, and there in the upper window was that yellow, livid face watching us. I wondered what in God's name could be the connection between that creature and my wife, or how could the woman whom I had seen the day before be connected with her.
So, what did you do?
Nothing, at first. For 2 days afterwards I stayed at home, and my wife appeared to be keeping her promise not to go to the cottage. She seemed to be loyal to our agreement, and as far as I knew, never left the house.
You said you did nothing at first, Mr. Munro.
Yes. On the third day, something happened which gave me ample evidence that her promise was far from being kept.
And what evidence was this?
I had gone into town that day, but returned by an earlier train than usual. I entered the house and... Effie! Effie, I'm back! Effie?
Oh, sir. So I didn't expect you.
No, I caught an earlier train.
I see. Excuse me, sir, I have things to do.
One moment.
Sir?
Where is your mistress?
She, I think she's gone for a walk, sir.
A walk?
Yes, sir.
You think so?
Excuse me, sir, I really must get on with my work now.
Is something wrong?
Wrong, sir? No, sir.
You seem somewhat upset.
Upset, sir? No, sir, it's just...
You have things to do, I quite understand. Very well, off you go.
Thank you, sir.
My mind was instantly filled with suspicion. I rushed upstairs to make sure she was not in the house. As I did so, I happened to glance out of one of the upper windows and saw the very maid with whom I had just been speaking running across the field in the direction of the cottage. Then, of course, I saw exactly what it all meant. My wife had gone over there and had asked the servant to call her if I should return. Tingling with anger, I rushed down and strode across, determined to end the matter once and forever.
Thus you encountered your wife and the maid.
I saw them hurrying back together along the lane, but I did not stop to speak with them.
Your state of mind was focused on the cottage.
On nothing else. For in there lay the secret which was casting a shadow over my life, and I vowed that, come what might, it should be a secret no longer. I did not even knock when I reached it, but turned the handle and rushed into the passage. It was all still and quiet on the ground floor. A kettle was singing on the fire, and a large black cat lay coiled up in a basket. But there was no sign of the woman whom I had seen before. There was no one at all in the whole house. The furniture and pictures were of the most common and vulgar description, save in the one chamber at the window of which I had seen the strange face. That was comfortable and elegant. And all my suspicions rose into a fierce, bitter blaze when I saw that on the mantelpiece stood a full-length photograph of my wife, which had been taken at my request only 3 months ago. I left the place feeling a weight at my heart, such as I have never felt before. When I arrived home, my wife came out into the hall, but I was too hurt and angry to speak to her and went into my study. She followed me, however, before I could shut the door.
I'm sorry.
I think it better if you left.
You've been to the cottage, have you not? I am sorry.
Are you indeed? Well, your sorrow solves nothing.
I'm sorry that I broke my promise to you.
Oh, for God's sake, Effie, leave me alone.
But if you knew all the circumstances, I'm sure you would forgive me.
I think things have passed the point of forgiveness, don't you?
But if only you
Then
knew
you'd
that...
better tell me, hadn't you?
I cannot. I cannot.
Then all I say to you is that until you tell me who it is who has been living in that cottage, and who it is to whom you gave that photograph, there can be no confidences between us. Now I suggest you leave me in peace.
Jack.
Leave me in peace, Effie. Please. That was yesterday, Mr. Holmes. I have not seen her since, nor do I know any more of this strange business. All I know now is that my marriage, a marriage I treasured and thought secure, is now no more than a sham. I place myself unreservedly in your hands.
So, you say it was unclear if the face at the window was a man or a woman.
It was always at a distance.
You do appear, however, to have been much affected by its appearance, the unusual colour, the strange rigidity, and so forth.
And so would anyone.
Tell me, how long is it since your wife asked you for the £100?
Nearly 2 months.
Yes, and have you ever seen a photograph of her first husband?
No. There was a great fire in Atlanta shortly after his death, and all her papers were destroyed.
And yet she has a certificate of death. You say you saw it.
Oh, yes. She got a duplicate after the fire.
Have you ever met anyone who knew her in America?
No.
Did she ever talk of revisiting the place?
No.
Or get letters from it?
No.
Yeah, thank you. Let me advise you, then. Return to Norbury and examine the windows of the cottage again. If you have reason to believe it inhabited, do not force your way in, but send a wire to my friend and me, and we'll be there within an hour of receiving it.
And if it's empty?
In that case, I shall come out tomorrow and talk it over with you. For now, goodbye. And above all, do not fret until you know that you really have cause.
Thank you. Thank you both. I will be in touch with you.
Before you go, Mr. Munro, your pipe.
My pipe? So that's where I left it. Thank you. Goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye, Mr. Munro. Well. Now, what do you think, Watson?
I think a glass of something is called for.
A glass, my dear fellow, a glass of something will be excellent, excellent.
I must say, Holmes, it's good to see you in such fine spirits again.
Well, as you know, there's nothing like an interesting case to set the pulse a-beating.
Do you have a theory?
Provisionally, yes. However, I shall be very surprised if it turns out not to be the correct one. But first, Watson, a little drink, and then a fine walk.
A walk, Holmes?
Why not? It's a beautiful day, and the exercise will do us good.
But I thought you...
The drink, Watson, the drink.
Holmes, would you mind if we stopped for a while and rested?
What's the matter, dear friend? Old age beginning to tell?
I think it must be.
Very well. Let's sit here. Oh, a delightful spot.
Thank you, Holmes.
Just look at that view, Watson. Look at it. It's quite beautiful.
Yes.
How could one ever tire of such a vista?
I thought you were going to explain your theory to me.
Yes, so I shall. You must forgive me, old fellow. It's just that I'm so enjoying this case that I'm reluctant to bring it to an end.
Nevertheless, the facts...
Quite so. Well, Watson, it seems to me the facts are these. The person at the cottage is the woman's first husband. How else can we explain her frenzied anxiety that her second husband should not enter? As I read it, it goes something like this. This woman marries in America. Her husband contracts some bothersome disease and becomes a leper or an imbecile, something, anyway, which is regarded as repellent. She leaves him eventually and returns to England. She changes her name and starts, as she thinks, a new life. She meets and marries Mr. Munro. She's been married 3 years and believes her position to be quite secure, having shown her husband the death certificate of some man whose name she has assumed. Suddenly, however, her first husband discovers her whereabouts, the information having been given to him by some unscrupulous woman who's become attached to him in some way. They write to the wife, threatening to come and expose her past life and her desertion of her invalid former husband, a past of which she could hardly be proud. Mrs. Munro asks her husband for £100 and endeavours to buy them off. In spite of this, they still arrive, and when Munro informs his wife that there are newcomers in the cottage, she suspects at once who they are. She waits until her present husband is asleep and then rushes to the cottage in an attempt to persuade them to leave her in peace. Having no success, she goes again the following morning, and her husband meets her coming out as he told us. She promises never to go there again, but 2 days later, the desire to get rid of those dreadful neighbours is too strong, and she makes one more attempt, taking with her her photograph, which, no doubt, has been demanded from her to strengthen their blackmail. And while she's talking with them, the maid rushes in to say her master has returned unexpectedly. The wife, knowing that her husband will come straight to the cottage, hurries the occupants out of the back door, probably into the grove of Scotch firs he mentioned. In this way, he finds the place deserted. Yes, I shall be very surprised, though, if it still is when we go this evening, as undoubtedly we shall. Well, what do you think of my theory, Watson? Watson? Wake up, Watson.
The cottage is still rented. Has seen face again at window. Will meet the 7 o'clock train and will take no steps until you arrive.
The weather being what it is, I thought it best to meet you with the trap.
Most thoughtful.
I saw lights in the cottage as I came down. We'll settle this once and for all.
And what is your plan?
I'm going to force my way in and see for myself who is in the house. I wish you both there as witnesses.
Legally, we're putting ourselves in the wrong, of course. But in this case, I think it worth it. That's open to question.
There are the lights of my house, and over there is the cottage. You see it?
Ah, the cottage. At last, Watson, my friend. The game is truly afoot. Oh, wish I'd brought my brolly.
Oh, look! Look there in the upper window! It's the creature! Now you've seen for yourselves! You've seen for yourselves! I'm not the only one at last!
Good heavens! What on earth is it? I can't imagine how it's gone!
For God's sake, Jack, go away from this place!
Effie, so you are here, as I thought!
Leave here, all of you! Leave here!
Out of our way!
I beg you!
You begged before! I'll not be made a fool of again!
Please, Jack, think better of it for both our sakes! Trust me once more and you will never regret it, never!
I've trusted you too long! Let go of me! My friends and I are going to settle this matter! Let go of me! Right, we're in!
And upstairs, I can get you!
Yes, come on, follow me!
Jack! No!
What? What in heaven's name? It's a little girl, Holmes. I can see that perfectly well, Watson.
But her face. Look at her face.
Yes, as you said, a vivid tint about it, and quite expressionless, quite expressionless.
I don't understand. What is this?
Well, let us see what we shall see. Now, come here, little girl. That's quite all right. No need to be afraid. That's it. That's it. There now. Well, as you can see now, Mr. Munro, it's not a face at all, but a mask.
A mask? Why is she wearing a...
And now, as you will also see, I remove it.
God! What is happening here? I can't believe my eyes.
So now you know, Jack.
I just can't believe it.
But now you know.
No? I know nothing.
But you force me to tell you against my better judgment.
Perhaps, Mrs. Munro, you'd prefer us to go downstairs.
No. The time is now. The place is of no importance.
Then, for God's sake, tell your story.
Very well, Jack. I shall tell my story. I shall tell of my first husband who died in Atlanta, and of my child who survived.
Your child survived? But you said
I shall tell of this locket I wear. A locket you did not know opens. There. That, my dear, is my first husband, John Hebron of Atlanta.
But he's...
the noblest man who ever walked the earth. I cut myself off from my race in order to wed him, and never once while he lived did I regret it. Our only child, which is the child you see here, took after his people rather than mine. And in fact, little Lucy is darker than her father ever was. But, dark or fair, she is my daughter, and I dearly love her. You see how she holds on to me now with such affection. When I left her in America, it was only because her health was weak. She was given to the care of this faithful woman who had once been our servant. Never for a moment did I dream of disowning her as my daughter. Never. But when fate brought us together, Jack, and I learnt to love you, I feared to tell you about my child. God forgive me, but I thought I might lose you because of her, and so turned away from my own daughter.
Mrs. Munro.
I'm all right. My husband wants the story told, and so I shall. For 3 years I have kept her a secret from you, Jack. For my own peace of mind, this nurse who looked after her kept me informed as to her welfare. Finally, however, came an overpowering desire to see her again, a desire I struggled against in vain. Though I knew the danger, I decided to bring her over, if only for a few weeks. I sent £100 to the nurse and gave her instructions with regard to the cottage so that she might come as a neighbour and seemingly with no connection to myself. Oh, dear Lord. My own child with no connection to myself, the very words stick in my throat. I pushed my precautions so far as to order the nurse to keep dear Lucy in the house by day and to cover up her little face and hands so that even those who might see her at the window would not gossip at there being a black child in the neighbourhood. If I had been less cautious, I might well have been more wise. But I was crazy with fear that you, Jack, would learn the truth, and all would be over between us, as now it is. It was you who first told me that the cottage had become occupied, so I knew they had arrived that day. I should, of course, have waited for the morning, but such was my excitement. I could not sleep and slipped from my bed knowing how hard it is to wake you. But you saw me go. That was the start and end of all. Next day you had my secret at your mercy, but nobly refrained from pushing your advantage. 3 days later, however, the nurse and child only just escaped by the back door as you came in the front. And now you know. You know it all. And I have been forced to do the thing that I most dreaded. Destroy your love for me by my own word of mouth and action. Your love has always been and always will be the thing I hold most dear. And perhaps one day you will understand that pain is the price we pay. I know now our marriage to be over, but I would ask of you in future days not to think too badly of me. Oh, Jack, what is to become of us? Of my child and me? Oh, Jack. Jack, please say something.
Mr. Munro,
Lucy, come here. Come to me.
There. That's it. Here. Let me lift you. There. Well now, Lucy.
What a lovely smile from such a lovely girl.
Oh, Jack.
Oh, my dear. I am not a very good man, I know. And I am aware, perhaps more than you know, of all my faults. But I think I may possibly be a better one than you have given me credit for.
I have been a fool. A dreadful fool.
Shh. All over now.
I am so ashamed.
No. No more tears. Come. Let's go home. Let's all go home. Let's leave this place.
Yes. And I think it's time, Holmes, for us to leave Norbury.
Yes, Watson, you're right. From now on, I think we'll be of more use in London.
You're very quiet, old fella. The journey back. All through supper, you've hardly said a word.
No.
Why so gloomy? The case had a successful outcome, even if events were not quite as you predicted.
Oh, yes.
Not worried about that young family, are you?
No, Watson, I'm not, no. In fact, rarely have I been so gratified to be wrong. The sight of them walking into their home to start a new and proper life together, it's worth all my own errors.
Exactly. So don't wallow in your failure to deduce an explanation which only Mrs. Munro herself could give. After all, if we hadn't gone to Norbury, the true story might never have been known. And there wouldn't have been a happy ending.
Right as always, old friend. Nevertheless, I shall take my candle and go to bed. I've learnt a lesson about myself today. And a little solitary contemplation won't do me any harm.
What?
Watson, if it should ever strike you that I am getting a little overconfident in my powers or giving less pains to a case than it deserves, kindly whisper Norbury in my ear, and I shall be infinitely obliged to you.
You may depend on it. Good night, Holmes.
Good night, Watson.
In The Yellow Face, Sherlock Holmes was played by Clive Merrison and Dr. Watson by Michael Williams, with Joan Matheson as Mrs. Hudson, Mark Straker as Grant Munro, Helena Breck as Effie Munro, and Cyril Jenkins as their maid. The violinist was Leonard Friedman. The Yellow Face was dramatized for radio by Jerry Jones and directed by Enid Williams.
Mr. Hall Pycroft?
Yes, sir?
Stockbroker's clerk, lately engaged at Coxon and Woodhouse's, about to take up a new post on the staff of Mawson's of Lombard Street?
That is correct.
I have heard some really extraordinary things about your financial ability. My name is Pinner, Arthur Pinner, financial agent. I am here to make you an offer. How would you like to be business manager of the Franco Midland Hardware Company Limited, with 134 branches in the towns and villages of France, not counting one in Brussels and one in San Remo? We can only offer a beggarly 500 to start with, but you are to have an overriding commission of 1%, and you may take my word for it that this will come to more than your salary.
But that's more than 1,000 a year.
You have my word for it, Mr. Pycroft. And a Pinner's word is better than a banker's draft. May I sit down?
The Stockbroker's Clerk by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, dramatized for radio by Dennis Hawthorne, with Clive Merrison as Sherlock Holmes and Michael Williams as Dr. John Watson, and featuring Jonathan Taffler as Hall Pycroft, Sean Barrett as Mr. Pinner, with Nigel Carrington as Inspector Gabriel. The Stockbroker's Clerk.
Whoa! Whoa! Now, you wait there, Pycroft, while I go and talk to Dr. Watson.
But, Mr. Holmes, I have to get to Birmingham. My appointment's for 7 o'clock this evening.
I know what time your appointment's set for, Mr. Pycroft, and I know what train you have to catch. We have ample time. I have never missed a train. Wait there, cabby.
Right you are, Gov. I'm sorry, there's no surgery on a Saturday.
I have not come to you as a patient, Watson, rather as a quondam colleague. May I come in?
Of course, my dear fellow. It's been such a long time.
Yes, 3 months to the day. The day of your wedding, in fact.
Yeah.
How is Mrs. Watson?
Oh, she's well, very well. But unfortunately, she's away for the weekend, staying with friends in Surrey.
Ah.
Yeah, but do go through.
You've been busy, I take it?
Yes, I have. Do sit down.
Thank you.
To establish oneself in general practice does require constant application.
But I thought this was already an established practice when you bought it.
Oh, indeed it was. Old Dr. Farker, who sold it to me, had at one time a great many patients, but alas, by the time he retired, his list was very much depleted.
Why, sir?
Well, partly his age, of course, but unfortunately he suffered from an affliction. He had some vitis dance.
Ah.
The public goes on the principle that he who would heal others must himself be whole. They take a dim view of the curative powers of a doctor whose own case is beyond the reach of his drugs.
The public looks only at the surface of life.
I'm confident, however, that I can build things up. Though it'll be hard sledding.
Your neighbour is a doctor, I see?
Yes, he bought his practice as I did.
Was that an old established one?
Oh, same as mine, really. Both have been here ever since the houses were built.
You got hold of the better of the two, then?
Oh, I think I did. Yeah, but how do you know?
By the front steps, my boy. Yours are worn 3 inches deeper than his.
Oh, my dear fellow. How good it is to see you again. My wife will be sorry to have missed you.
This is not a social call, Watson.
Oh?
We're somewhat pressed for time.
Are we?
I trust that the cares of medical practice have not entirely obliterated the interest which you used to take in our little deductive problems.
On the contrary. Only last night I was looking over my old notes and classifying some of our past results.
I trust that you don't consider your collection closed.
Sure, not at all. I would very much like to have more of such experiences.
Today, for example?
Yes, today, if you like.
Yes, as far off as Birmingham.
Certainly, if you wish it.
And your practice?
Oh, I look after my neighbours when he goes. He's always ready to work off the debt.
Nothing could be better.
I'll just write a note for him.
I perceive that you've been unwell lately. Summer colds are always a little trying.
I was confined to the house by a severe chill for 3 days last week. I thought, however, that I'd cast off every trace of it.
So you have. You look remarkably robust.
How then do you know about it?
My dear fellow, you know my methods.
You deduced it, then?
Certainly.
And from what?
From your slippers.
My slippers? How on earth
Then you could not have had them for more than a few weeks. The soles are slightly scorched. For a moment I thought that they might have got wet and been burned in the drying, but near the instep there's a small wafer of paper with the shopman's hieroglyphics upon it. Damp would, of course, have removed this. It follows, therefore, that you've been sitting with your feet outstretched to the fire, which a man would hardly do, even in so wet a June as this, if he were in his full health.
Simplicity itself.
I'm afraid that I rather give myself away when I explain. Results without explanations are much more impressive. I'll finish your note to your neighbour and we'll be off to Birmingham.
Certainly. What's the case?
You shall hear it all in the train. My client is outside in a four-wheeler. We have time to spare, but not much. All right, cabby. Euston Station.
Right, go.
In you get, Watson. Here up. Now, let me introduce you. This, Watson, is my client, Mr. Hall Pycroft. Mr. Pycroft, my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson.
Pleased to meet you, sir.
How do you do?
Mr. Pycroft has a tale to tell.
Indeed I have, sir.
But it's too good a tale to be interrupted, so I suggest that you do not tell it until we're on board the train.
Mr. Pycroft was a well-built, fresh-complexioned young fellow with a frank, honest face and a slight, crisp yellow moustache. He wore a very shiny top hat and a neat suit of sober black, which made him look what he was, a smart young city man, of the class who have been labelled cockneys, but who give us our crack volunteer regiments and who turn out more fine athletes and sportsmen than any body of men in these islands. His round, ruddy face was naturally full of cheeriness, but the corners of his mouth were pulled down and gave evidence of distress. He was clearly nervous and worried.
Now, we have a clear run here of 17 minutes. I want you, Mr. Hall Pycroft, to tell my friend your very interesting experience exactly as you've told it to me, or with more detail, if possible. It'll be of use to me to hear the succession of events again.
Very good, sir.
This is a case, Watson, which may prove to have something in it, or may prove to have nothing, but which at least presents those unusual and outre features which are as dear to you as they are to me. Now, Mr. Pycroft, I shall not interrupt you again.
The worst of my story is that I show myself up as such a confounded fool. Of course, it may all work out all right, and I don't see that I could have done otherwise. But if I have lost my crib and get nothing in exchange, I shall feel what a soft Johnny I have been.
Your crib?
My job. I'm a city clerk, and I used to have a billet at Coxon and Woodhouse of Draper's Gardens. But early in the spring, they came a nasty cropper through the Venezuelan loan. You've doubtless heard of that business. It was a huge crash.
Indeed, yes. Well, one of my patients was badly stung.
Well, sir, it more or less wiped out the firm, and all we clerks were turned adrift. 27 of us. I've been with them for 5 years, and old Coxon gave me a ripping good testimonial when the end came. I tried here and tried there, but there were lots of other chaps on the same lay as myself, so it was a perfect frost for some time.
How much were you paid at Coxon's?
£3 a week. I had saved about 70 of them, but I soon worked my way through that and out at the other end. I was fairly floored at the last. Could hardly find the stamps to answer advertisements or envelopes to stick them to. My boots were worn out padding up and down office stairs, and I seemed just as far from getting a billet as ever.
But you did not give up, you persevered.
I did, yes. I saw there was a vacancy at Mawson & Williams, the great stockbroking firm in Lombard Street. I dare say EC is not much in your line, but I can tell you this is about the richest house in London.
Indeed, I know it well. I've been of assistance to one of the directors in the past in a private capacity.
The advertisement was to be answered by letter only. I sent in my testimonial and application, but without the least hope of getting it. Back came an answer by return saying that if I would appear next Monday, I might take over my new duties at once, provided that my appearance was satisfactory.
Well done, Mr. Pycroft. Congratulations. A clear case of persistence rewarded.
No one knows how these things are worked out, Doctor. Some people say the manager just plunges his hand into the heap and takes the first that comes. Anyway, it was my innings that time, and I don't ever wish to feel better pleased. The screw was £1 a week rise, and the duties just about the same as at Coxon's.
And there was to be no preliminary interview. The job was offered sight unseen?
That is correct. It is not unusual in my line of business.
Yes, so far so good. But now, Watson, pay attention.
That very evening, after I'd been promised the appointment, I was sitting up in my digs doing a smoke when up came my landlady with a card which had Arthur Pinner, financial agent, printed on it.
Financial agent. Did the name Pinner mean anything to you?
I'd never heard of him, but I asked the landlady to show him up, and in he walked.
Describe him.
Middle-aged, middle-sized, dark hair, dark eyes, black beard, touch of the sheeny about his nose.
Mr. Hall Pycroft, I believe?
Yes, sir.
Lately engaged at Coxon and Woodhouses?
Yes, sir.
And now on the staff at Mawson's?
Quite so.
Well, I have heard some really extraordinary stories about your financial ability. May I sit down?
Of course.
Thank you. You remember Parker, who used to be Coxon's manager?
Indeed I do.
He can never say enough of your talents.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to hear that.
You have a good memory.
Pretty fair.
You have kept in touch with the market while you've been out of work?
Yes, I read the stock exchange list every morning.
Now that shows real application. That is the way to prosper. However, you won't mind my testing you, will you?
Not at all.
How are New Zealand consolidated?
104.
And Ayrshires?
105 to 105 and a quarter.
And British Broken Hills?
7 to 7 and 6.
Wonderful. This quite fits in with all that I had heard. My boy, you are much too good to be a clerk at Mawson's.
Well, Mr. Pinner, other people don't seem to think quite so much of me as you seem to do. I had a hard enough fight to get this berth, and I'm very glad to have it.
Pooh, man, you should rise above it. You are not in your true sphere. Now, I'll tell you how it stands with me. What I have to offer is little enough when measured by your ability, but when compared with Mawson's, it is light to dark. Let me see, when do you go to Mawson's?
On Monday.
I think I would risk a little sporting flutter that you don't go there at all.
Not go to Mawson's?
No, sir. By that day you will be business manager of the Franco-Midland Hardware Company Limited, with 134 branches in the towns and villages of France, not counting one in Brussels and one in San Remo.
I have never heard of that company, Mr. Pinner.
Very likely not. It has been kept very quiet. The capital was all privately subscribed, and it is too good a thing to let the public into. You follow me?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Good boy. My brother, Mr. Harry Pinner, is promoter. After allotment, he will join the board as managing director. He knows that I am in the swim down here, and he asked me to pick up a good man cheap. A young, pushing man with plenty of snap about him. Parker spoke of you, and that brought me here tonight. We can only offer you a beggarly 500 to start with.
500 a year?
Only that at the beginning, I'm afraid, but you are to have an overriding commission of 1% on all business done by your agents, and you may take my word for it that this will come to more than your salary.
But that's more than 1,000 a year.
You have my word for it, and a Pinner's word is better than a banker's draft.
Mr. Pinner, I must be frank, sir. I know nothing about hardware.
Tut, my boy, you know about figures.
Yes. Yes, I do. Mr. Pinner, I really don't know what to say. Let me put it this way. Mawson's only gives me 200 a year, but Mawson's is safe. Now, really, I know so little about your company that if...
Smart. You are the very man for us. You are not to be talked over, and quite right too. Now, I have in my pocket a note for £100, and if you think we can do business, you can just slip it into your pocket as an advance upon your salary.
£100? This is very handsome, sir. When would you want me to take over my duties?
We would want you to be in Birmingham tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Birmingham?
That is where the company offices are at the moment. I have a rail ticket for Birmingham in my pocket also.
Well, sir, I think we are in business, as they say.
Good man. You will not regret this, Mr. Pycroft. Now, I am going to give you a letter which you will take to my brother. You will find him at 126B Corporation Street. The offices, the temporary offices, are at that address. He will have to confirm your engagement, but between ourselves, it will be all right.
I hardly know how to express my gratitude.
Don't try, my boy. You have only got your desserts. Before I go, there are one or two things, mere formalities, but they must be observed. You have some writing paper on your table, I see. If you could just pen a few words to my dictation.
Oh, yes. Yes, of course. Right. Well, I'm ready.
I, Paul Pycroft, am perfectly willing to act as business manager to the Franco-Midland Hardware Company Limited at a salary of £500.
Salary of £500.
Excellent. I'll take that if I may. Thank you. Now, before I bid you good night, there is one other detail. What do you intend to do about Mawson's?
Well, I shall write and resign at once.
That is precisely what I don't want you to do.
I beg your pardon?
I had a row over you with Mawson's manager. I went to ask him about you, and he was very offensive. Accused me of trying to coax you away, that sort of thing. I'm afraid I fairly lost my temper. If you want good men, you should pay them a good price, said I. He would rather have our small price than your big one, said he. I'll lay you a £5, said I, that when he has my offer, you will never so much as hear from him again. done," said he. "We picked him out of the gutter and he won't leave us so easily."
Well, I'll be...
Those were his very words.
He's an impudent scoundrel. I've never so much as seen him in my life. Well, why should I consider him in any way? I shall certainly not write if he would rather I didn't.
Good. That's a promise. Maybe I'll split that £5 with you. Well, I am delighted to have got so good a man. Here is your advance of £100 and your rail ticket, and here is the letter from my brother. You and he will get on famously, I think. We are very alike in appearance, except that he's fair and I'm dark. As for personality, well, he's serious and I'm not. Don't forget the address, 126B, Corporation Street, and remember that 1 o'clock tomorrow is your appointment. Give me a hand, sir. You have made a wise decision, Mr. Pycroft. A momentous decision. I will see myself out, thank you. Good night. Good night.
Well, it's clear to me that you've been enjoying what I believe is known as a lucky streak.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Watson. You can imagine how pleased I was at such an extraordinary stroke of good fortune. I sat up half the night hugging myself over it.
And the next morning, Mr. Pycroft, how did you feel the next morning?
I must confess I was uneasy. It all seemed too good to be true somehow. But I had £100 in my pocket, a rail ticket, and an address to go to. Business, gentlemen, is based on trust.
So off you went?
I did. I took an early train, which gave me plenty of time for my appointment. I booked into an hotel in New Street and made my way to the address of the company. 126B was in a passage between two large shops. At the bottom of a large winding staircase were painted the names of the various companies that had offices there. There was no such name as the Franco-Midland Hardware Company Limited. I stood for a moment with my heart in my boots, wondering whether the whole thing was not an elaborate hoax. I was frightened.
Are you Mr. Hall Pycroft?
Oh, yes. Yes, I am.
I was expecting you, but you are a trifle before your time. I am Mr. Harry Pinner.
Pleased to meet you.
I had a note from my brother this morning. He sings your praises very loudly.
I was looking for the offices when you came.
We have not got our name up as yet. We only secured these very temporary premises last week. Come up with me and we'll talk things over.
He was indeed very much like his brother, though fair and clean-shaven. Much the same tone of voice, but decidedly less hearty in his manner. We climbed to the top of the staircase, and there, right under the slates, were a couple of empty, uncarpeted, dusty little rooms. These were the offices.
Come in, Mr. Pycroft. Ah. You are alarmed. Doubtless you expected a great office with shining desks and rows of clerks. The noise and bustle of a thriving commercial enterprise.
Well,
Don't be disheartened. We are only at the beginning of our adventure. Rome was not built in a day. We have lots of money at our backs, though we do not as yet cut much of a dash in the office line. But a desk, 2 chairs and a ledger, all one needs to do business with. Pray sit down.
Thank you.
You have a letter for me from my brother?
Yes. Here you are.
Uh-huh. Yes, I see. You seem to have made a vast impression on Arthur, and I know him to be a pretty shrewd judge. He swears by London, of course, and I by Birmingham. But I shall follow his advice this time. You may consider yourself definitely engaged.
Thank you.
You have received an advance on your salary, I believe?
Yes, thank you. A very generous one.
This is a very large undertaking. Doubtless you would like to know what your function will be within the framework of the company.
Oh, I would indeed.
You will eventually manage the great depot in Paris, which will pour a flood of English crockery into the shops of 134 agents in France. You will, of course, receive a commission on the sales.
Your brother did mention that.
Good. The final details will be completed in a week. Meanwhile, you will remain in Birmingham and make yourself useful.
In what way?
This book is a directory of Paris. I want you to take it home with you and to mark off all the hardware sellers with their addresses. It will be of the greatest use for me to have them.
Well, surely there are classified lists.
Not sufficiently detailed for our requirements. Stick at it and let me have the lists by Monday at 12 noon. Good day, Mr. Pycroft.
Oh, yes, sir.
If you continue to show zeal and intelligence, you will find the company a good master. Until Monday.
Until Monday.
A strange introduction to your duties as manager. Copying out entries from a street directory.
Maybe, Dr. Watson, though I can see some justification for it. Classified lists are often unreliable, but I was still uneasy. It was the look of the offices, the absence of the company name on the wall. These left a bad impression as to the position of my employers.
But you applied yourself to the task.
I did. Indeed, I did. I had their money, I was their employee.
And you finished it by Monday?
Oh, no. Nowhere near. I'd only got as far as H. I went round at 12 as arranged.
Was there any improvement in the state of the offices?
No, none at all. Mr. Pinner told me to come again on Wednesday, but it was still unfinished. So I hammered away at it until yesterday, Friday, then I brought the full list round.
These meetings with Mr. Harry Pinner, they were always at a fixed time?
Yes, always at midday. Come on Wednesday at 12, come on Friday at 12.
He was always waiting for you?
Yes.
You never had a key to the office?
No.
What happened when you finally brought the list to him?
Well, Mr. Pycroft, you have finished your task?
Yes, sir. Here you are.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I underestimated the difficulty of all this, but the information will be of very material assistance to me.
It did take some time.
Detail does take time, Mr. Pycroft, but detail is essential to success. Now I want you to make a similar list of the furniture shops. They sell crockery too.
The furniture shops?
Yes, and you can come here tomorrow evening at 7. Tell me how you're getting on.
Tomorrow? Saturday?
Let me take you into my confidence. Things are beginning to move. I shall be receiving a communication from my brother tomorrow in the afternoon. Then things will begin to happen, and I may need your assistance.
In the meanwhile, I start on the furniture shops.
Detail, Mr. Pycroft. Detail. But don't overwork yourself, my boy. Take the evening off. Go to Day's musical. Enjoy yourself. You can afford it now. Lovely girls, great entertainers. Charles Coburn. 2 lovely black eyes. Oh, what a surprise. Only for telling a man he was wrong. 2 lovely black eyes. First class stuff, Mr. Pycroft. Enjoy yourself. It's all beginning to happen, my boy. We can change the words, Mr. Pycroft, eh? What about this? 2 lovely bright eyes. Oh, what a surprise. Simply for telling a man he was right. 2 lovely bright eyes. See yourself out.
I was halfway down the stairs, gentlemen, before it struck me.
Pay close attention, Watson. Right, go on.
This Mr. Pinner, when he laughed and sang, I saw that the second tooth upon the left-hand side had been very badly stuffed with gold. When I had spoken with the other Mr. Pinner in London, he had laughed a good deal. I noticed that his teeth were stuffed in this very identical fashion. The glint of gold caught my eye, you see.
Do you see, Watson?
Yes, I'm beginning to.
Well, you expect 2 brothers to be alike, especially if you're told that they are. The figure, the voice even, that's not surprising. But the colour of the hair, the beard, they could be fake, an easy disguise. The gold tooth, though, that was a horse of a different colour.
The 2 Pinners are one and the same man.
I went back to my hotel, put my head in a basin of water and tried to think it out. Why had he sent me from London to Birmingham? Why had he got there before me? And why had he written a letter from himself to himself?
Those are indeed the questions.
I could find no answer to them. Then suddenly it struck me that what was dark to me might be very light to Sherlock Holmes. I had just time to get up to town by the night train and see you this morning.
You did indeed.
You will keep this appointment with Pinner.
He will, and we shall accompany him. But how? Mr. Pycroft will present us as two friends of his who are in want of a billet. What more natural than that he should bring us to the attention of his managing director?
And what are we supposed to be?
I shall be an accountant. You a clerk. We have some time before we arrive. You, Mr. Pycroft, must compose yourself with a view to your appointment. I must think. And you, Watson, must get into your character, as they say in the theatre.
Holmes began biting his nails and staring blankly out of the window. Between the three of us grew that air of tension and expectancy that always precedes the denouement of an inquiry. Presently, we pulled into New Street Station exactly on time. How reliable is the London North Western? Being rather early for our assignation, we made our way slowly along Corporation Street, which, since it was a Saturday evening, was relatively quiet and uncrowded.
It's no use being at all before our time. He only comes to see me, apparently. The place is deserted up to the very hour that he names. I've tried calling there at other times. It's always locked.
That is suggestive.
There he is. Do you see? Walking ahead of us in the brown suit.
Let us not get too close to him. We do not want to meet before he's in the office.
We dropped back slightly, still keeping our quarry in sight. We saw him suddenly check and turn his head, looking across the street towards a newsboy who was bawling out the latest edition of the evening paper. All at once, without looking to left or right, he dashed across the street, being almost run over by a cab.
Get out of it!
He bought a paper, and, clutching it in his hand, he recrossed the street and vanished down a small alleyway between two large shops.
Company's offices are down there.
One moment.
What is it?
The paper that he's just bought. It was done on impulse, wouldn't you say? Unexpected. He put his life at risk. Something must have prompted him.
Shall I go and buy a copy?
No, we must not be diverted from our purpose. Lead on, Mr. Pycroft. Onward and upward.
Here we are, then. Ready, gentlemen?
Quite ready.
Yes. Who is that?
It's Pycroft, Mr. Pinner.
Oh, yes, yes, of course. Come in.
You asked me to... You all right, Mr. Pinner? You look...
Who are these gentlemen whom you've brought with you?
This is Mr. Price of Bermondsey, and this is Mr. Harris, who is a local gentleman.
And what is their business here?
They're both gentlemen of experience, but they've been out of a place for some little time, and they hope that you might find an opening for them in the company's employment.
Oh, yes. The company's employment. Very possibly, it might be...
Mr. Pinner, are you ill?
I'm not very well, no. I have no doubt we shall be able to do something for your friends. What is your particular line, Mr. Harris?
I am an accountant.
Oh, yes. We shall want something of that sort. And you, Mr. Price?
A clerk, sir.
Well, I have every hope that the company may accommodate you. I will let you know about it as soon as we come to any conclusion. Now, I beg that you will go. For God's sake, leave me to myself.
I'm sorry you're unwell, Mr. Pinner, but may I remind you that I'm here by appointment to receive some instructions from you?
Oh, certainly. Certainly, I have not forgotten. If you will excuse me, I must just go into the other room for a moment or two. You may wait here, and there is no reason why your friends should not wait with you. I will be entirely at your service in a few minutes, if I might trespass on your patience. Thank you.
Oh, what now? Is he giving us the slip?
Impossible.
Why so?
That door leads only to an inner room.
Yes, there is no exit.
None.
Is it furnished?
Oh, it was empty yesterday.
What on earth can he be doing? Well, there's something which I don't understand in this matter. If ever a man is 3 parts mad with terror, that man's name is Pinner. What do you think, Watson?
Medically speaking, I'd say he was on the edge of a breakdown.
So what brought it on?
He suspects that we're detectives.
That's it.
No, that is not it. He did not turn pale when he saw us. He was pale when we entered the room. Something happened before we came in. Something changed him.
What's that? Why is he knocking at the door?
Dear God! The door's barred! Let her break it down! Hurry! Hurry! Now then! 1, 2, 3!
Empty. There's no one in here.
There's another door in the corner.
That's only a cupboard.
Let us see.
Dear Pinard.
He's hanged himself.
Here. I'll hold him up. Right. Take the weight. Now, you unhook him. That's it. Bring him across here and lay him on the floor.
Is he dead?
Not yet. He used his braces as the rope. The elastic has cut into his neck. I can't untie the knot.
Here's my knife.
Good. There. There. Oh. Now, let me see. Yes. He's still breathing.
Yeah.
Pulse is faint, but it's there. Open the window. Is there any water in here, Pycroft?
There's a carafe in the other room.
Bring it, will you?
Why did he do it? Why? To hang oneself on impulse.
He's very weak.
Here you are, Doctor.
Oh, good. Now, try and swallow some of this. That's it, that'll do. Now, lie back, lie still. Whew. A near thing. But he'll live. Now, give me a coat, Pycroft. I'll cover him up.
Here you are.
I suppose we ought to call the police in now. And yet I must confess I'd like to give them a complete case when they come.
It's a blessed mystery to me. Whatever he wanted to bring me all the way up here for, and then...
Pooh. All that's clear enough. And it's not just a question of he. There are two of them.
But it was established that the two Pinners were the one man.
Yes, but not acting alone. I think that's fairly obvious, don't you?
But I must confess I'm out of my depth.
Oh, surely, if you consider the events at first, they can only point to one conclusion.
What do you make of them?
Well, the whole thing hinges on 2 points. The first is the making of Pycroft write a declaration by which he entered the services of this preposterous company. Do you not see how very suggestive that is?
No, I'm afraid that I missed the point.
Why did they want him to do it? Not as a business matter. These arrangements are usually verbal, and there's no earthly reason why this should be an exception.
I don't follow.
Don't you see, my young friend, that they were anxious to obtain a specimen of your handwriting and had no other way of doing it?
But why?
Quite so. Why? When we answer that, we have made some progress with our little problem. Why? There can be only one adequate reason. Someone wanted to learn to imitate your writing and had to procure a specimen of it first. And now, if we pass on to the second point, we find that each throws a light upon the other. That point is the request made by Pinner that you should not resign your place, which would leave the manager of Mawson's in full expectation that a Mr. Hall Pycroft, whom we'd never seen, was about to enter the office on Monday morning.
My God! What a blind beetle I have been!
Now you see the point about the handwriting. Suppose that someone turned up in your place who writes a completely different hand from that in which you'd applied for the vacancy. Of course, the game would have been up. But in the interval, someone learned to imitate you, and his position was therefore secure. I presume that nobody in that office had set eyes upon you?
No, I know no one who works at Mawson's.
Very good. Of course, it was of the utmost importance to prevent you from thinking better of it, and also to prevent you from coming into contact with anyone who might tell you that your double was at work in your place.
So I was packed off to Birmingham?
Precisely. That's why you were given that handsome advance, and why, once you were here, enough work was found for you to do to prevent your going to London, where you might have burst their little game up. And that is why there has to be two of them.
Well, yes, I see that, but why should this man pretend to be his own brother?
That also is perfectly clear. One man is to impersonate you at the office, but having hooked you, they needed someone to keep you up here. This man elected to play two roles rather than admit a third person to the plot.
Yes, I see now. He was taking a great risk, was he not?
All crime involves great risk, Watson. He changed his appearance and manner as far as he could. The first Mr. Pinner who came to see you...
Mr. Arthur.
Mr. Arthur, dark hair and a black beard. It would not risk disguise. For that meeting, he would be close to you in a well-lit room. But here, in these dingy, ill-lit offices, he could take the chance. The beard shaved off and a fair wig added on. Permit me, Mr. Pinner?
No, don't.
There, gentlemen. The true face of Mr. Harry Pinner.
Well, it fooled me. I had no suspicions in the matter until he sang and laughed.
And you saw the gold filling.
Good Lord! Well, I've been fooled in this way. What has the other Hall Pycroft been doing at Mawson's? Well, what should we do, Mr. Holmes?
We must wire to Mawson's.
They shut at 12 on Saturdays.
There may be some doorkeeper or attendant.
Yes, they keep a permanent guard there on account of the value of the securities they hold. I remember hearing it talked of in the city.
Very good. We shall wire to him and see if all is well and if a clerk of your name is working there. That is clear enough. What is not clear is why, at the sight of us, this man should instantly walk out of the room and hang himself.
The paper.
What?
That paper. It's in the paper.
Oh, of course. Oh, idiot that I was. I thought at the time. To be sure, the secret lies there. Where is it?
In the next room. I'll get it.
Sherlock Holmes. I did not recognize you. But then my mind was elsewhere.
Here we are. It's in the stop press. Crime in the city, murder at Mawson and Williams. Gigantic attempted robbery. Capture of the criminal. Oh, that's all. No, there's no report. Murder.
It's time for the police. Mr. Pycroft, if you'd have the kindness to step out and fetch them. The doctor and I will remain on guard.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Right away.
On guard, Mr. Holmes? Do you really think I tried to escape? No. Even if I had the strength, I haven't got the will. It's broken, gentlemen. It's broken.
I would say that you had answered the riddle, Mr. Holmes.
Half the riddle, Inspector Gabriel.
He has made a full confession. The case is closed. You gave us the key, and then it was simplicity itself. There were two villains involved, and there were two brothers.
Good heavens. But I thought that...
The Beddington brothers. You have heard of them, I expect?
Of course. Ned and Jethro Beddington. One a forger and cracksman.
And one a confidence trickster.
The perfect combination.
But we needed the key.
Excuse me, Inspector Gabriel, but what are you talking about?
Two halves of a riddle, Mr. Pycroft. The first half and your involvement in it you already know. The second half...
was enacted earlier this afternoon in Lombard Street, London, EC1. Sergeant Tusson of the City Police observed a man coming down the front steps of Mawson and Williams. He was carrying a carpet bag. The sergeant's suspicions were instantly aroused, but when he tried to interrogate the man, he took flight. And it was only after a chase and a desperate struggle that the sergeant, assisted by Constable Barry, succeeded in arresting him.
What was in the carpet bag?
Nearly £100,000 worth of American railway bonds. And a large amount of scrip in other mines and companies.
This was Jethro Beddington, of course.
Correct.
Murder, the paper said.
Following the apprehension of Beddington, the premises were entered and searched. The body of the guard was found, doubled up and thrust into the largest of the safes. The man's skull had been shattered by a blow from a poker delivered from behind.
A brutal crime.
The Beddingtons are brutal men, Dr. Watson.
And they nearly got away with it. Nothing would have been discovered until Monday. And by that time, they would have been out of the country and away.
And the police would have been after you, Mr. Pycroft. Don't forget, the crime was committed in your name.
Whew. Lucky escape, then.
The City Police were puzzled. The Beddingtons always worked together. But they'd only got one of them, and there was no obvious lead to the other. That was the riddle. But thanks to Mr. Holmes...
Thanks, rather, to Mr. Pycroft's keen eye, the riddle is now answered.
And two violent men have been removed from society.
That is true, but human nature is a strange thing, Inspector. This evening we saw that even a villain and a murderer can inspire such affection that his brother turns to suicide when he learns that his life's forfeited. Jethro will hang, and Ned an accessory. Life, at least.
We had no choice to our action.
No, we had no choice. Well, gentlemen, we have time to catch the London train. If we hurry. There are times when the first pipe of the morning's the most welcome, but at other times it's the pipe at the end of a successful day that gives most pleasure.
The pipe of contentment.
Mr. Pycroft's in abstract mood.
Well, gentlemen, I won't deny but that it has been a thrilling and once-in-a-lifetime experience. But I must now look to the future, which in my case is somewhat bleak.
Oh dear. Do you think so? I'm not so sure of that. Let us look at the facts. Firstly, I take it that you still have most of the £100 advance.
Oh, yes. What shall I do about that?
Well, I very much doubt if the Beddingtons will ask for it back. I should keep it if I were you. Secondly, come Monday morning, Mawson's will be a clerk short. I suggest you station yourself outside the front door before they open, and as soon as they do, seek out the manager and tell him your story.
Well, yes, but to fall for a trick like that, it's hardly a recommendation.
Well, my belief is that the manager will have enough wit to realise that a man who's been tricked once is unlikely to be tricked again.
Quite so, I agree with that.
As for recommendations, I mentioned earlier today that I'm acquainted with one of the directors of Mawson's. I shall use what influence I have on your behalf, and I have no doubt that Dr. Watson will also back you.
Indeed I will, Mr. Pycroft. Anything I can do.
Gentlemen, I don't know how to thank you.
Don't try. Relight your pipe and entertain us with stories of the city. What was the Venezuelan loan?
In The Stockbroker's Clerk, Sherlock Holmes was played by Clive Merrison and Dr. Watson by Michael Williams, with Jonathan Taffler as Hall Pycroft, Sean Barrett as Mr. Pinner, and Nigel Carrington as Inspector Gabriel. The violinist was Leonard Friedman. The Stockbroker's Clerk was dramatised for radio by Dennis Hawthorne and directed by Enid Williams.